Headphone warning, I do tend to get very excited during these plot leak videos, so I'm warning you now, if you're listening to this video on headphones, go ahead and turn this video down. House of the Dragon, the up-and-coming successor show to Game of Thrones, has actually been under development since about 2016. Now, we didn't really start hearing waves, or it didn't start making noise in the media up until about a year ago. Well, after Game of Thrones went off and HBO confirmed that they would be picking up this show and not the other successor show that was supposed to be based on The Long Night, or 10,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. Basically a retelling of the origin stories of the others. It would seem very similar to Game of Thrones, and that, along with a lot of the information that we received from the set of the show, it makes sense why they decided to go another route and focus on the Targaryens and their height of power. Dragons, tits, and incest is what made this show so great, and that's not really that existent if they were to go the route of the Long Night successor show. One thing everyone missed about what they told us about the House of the Dragon is that it had been picked up for an entire season 1 series, and that the pilot had been written by Ryan Condal, the guy who's being held as like the main showrunner. Shows do not get greenlit without a pilot. Every single show in the history of television always has to have one of these pilot episodes that the public rarely gets to see to greenlight a show. It's what shows the executives what the show is capable of. They probably will never release it because it's rough and a lot of the casting will be recast and it's usually missing a ton of CGI, but House of the Dragon has had a pilot that was filmed. In this video, I want to discuss a potential episode 1 plot leak, you can't tell but it's in air quotations there, about House of the Dragon. Now remember, take this information with a grain of salt because it's more or less bullshit, but is in fact entertaining nonetheless. Here's your sign. Now, before we get started, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 420. And also, this is the most important part, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get alerted every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. I recently had a contest going for this drawing I did of the House Stark sigil and the House Targaryen sigil. The winner of that drawing is Kieran Bell. Please message me over on Twitter at Sir_Hunts for details about your prize. And a super special shout out to Brick23, Bloody Tyrant, Leah Hendrickson, Angie Delehanty, Nancy Tockstein, Marilyn Miller, Fred Wicks, BEL-a-Donna, Catertot, Joe Swag, and Damon Mayo. They are all members of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. And if you all watching this video are interested, check out the link right up here or one of the links down below in the description. Now before I get into the plot leak, I just wanted to quickly address two things that I've seen a lot of questions about in the comment section. The first being where or what source material to read in order to know what's going to happen more in depth about during the House of the Dragon, or what time frame this events are going to be taking place of. Really, the Dance of the Dragons. Now, if you're unaware, Dance of the Dragons is actually referenced in almost every single piece of material that George R. Martin has written for A Song of Ice and Fire, but the most well thought out and well detailed info comes from The Princess and the Queen, The Rogue Prince, my favorite, A World of Ice and Fire, which has a bunch of other back history and information on the world of Westeros and really the world of everything related to A Song of Ice and Fire. Then you also have most recently Fire and Blood Part 1. And to be honest, a lot of that information in The Princess and the Queen and The Rogue Prince is actually in Fire and Blood. So if you really just want to read or get one book with the most information, check out Fire and Blood. George released that on November 18th, 2018, and according to him, it has enough material in it to write 17 Game of Thrones spinoffs. So make sure you go ahead and go grab that. And also, another thing that I want to mention, which is not really that important, I just feel like I'll address it now because I never really formally addressed it. It's the weight of Rhaenyra. Quite literally, Rhaenyra during her time was known as being plump. She never really lost the baby weight from when she had 3 marriages by the age of 20. So she was always resentful of Alicent being like a slim, slender queen who had, also given birth to kids, but was able to drop the weight much quicker. Now, in the books, that's a pretty important aspect of her character. It kind of makes more sense when you're reading her thoughts about why she reacts a certain way or why she has such a disdain for Alicent. But it should also be noted that according to Prince Damon, Princess Rhaenyra is the most beautiful woman in all of the 7 kingdoms. I personally do not know if they are going to go the chonker route of picking a thicker actress to play Rhaenyra. It's not really, or nothing really is confirmed in the 7 kingdoms until we get to hear from the person's point of view. So like within the TV show, a lot of things that were described in the books as being one way aren't really practical for an adaptation, so they just sort of mush it down, like for instance the scar over Tyrion's nose. Now obviously if they had done that, Tyrion, the actor Peter Dinklage, who was in almost every single scene of the show, every episode, he would have had to wear a prosthesis over his face that would have probably, you know, sort of annoyed the shit out of him after a while. So what they did was they had one character look at Tyrion's face and say, oh, it isn't that bad as if everyone's describing. So that makes me think that could be what they're going to do with Rhaenyra's weight. Like, she may be a little bit thicker, but one character will notice and say, according to the Seven Kingdoms, you're a fat little piggy, and now that I see you in real life, you're not quite that big. They could approach it that way. We have to realize that the Maesters who are telling the stories about the Dance of Dragons, they're not that consistent in their reliability. Like, we get to hear more their opinion of the events based on where their allegiances lie. And George does a really good job of showing their bias in their writing, and it's hilarious. Like, for instance, Archmaester Gillilan doesn't really think that the testimony of the mushroom is all that accurate, yet he keeps referring to it as a semi-canonical source. The Maesters love to contradict themselves when trying to say who's the most reliable storyteller when they're not reliable themselves. Now, like I mentioned before, I am going to make a video on the testimony of the mushroom, but I, for one, believe more of what he has to say since he was actually there. A lot of the info we get from the Maesters during this time are playing loyalties towards one side, so of course their stories are going to favor someone else over another person. Now, before I start getting ripped to shreds in the comment section for being 6 minutes into this video and not having started on the plot leak, now according to this person, House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 1 will start with a panning shot of Dragonstone. 6 dragons can be seen flying in the distance. A horn is heard, and the scene merges with the dragon rider arriving atop the Red Keep. It's Prince Daemon, and he's on Caraxes, who is described as a bright red dragon, similar to the size of Rhaegar during Season 7. The next scene is Daemon walking through the throne room, and we are introduced to the Greens. Aegon II makes a joke about Daemon looking old and poor. The prince informs Aegon that if he left the shadow of his mother and actually ventured outside the gates of King's Landing, maybe one day he wouldn't look like a cunt baby at his mother's teat. Viserys, the king, quiets both of them down, and then we are introduced to Alicent, who enters the room and smirks at Daemon. This person goes on to state that the next scene is up north. The landscape is very similar to that of Season 1, as in we get a shot of the outside gates of Winterfell and they're surrounded by fields of lush green. We are then shown the Great Hall, and Winterfell is in its prime. There is a feast happening, and it is being held in honor of Lord Cregan Stark, Warden of the North, coming into his power. The scene ends with Lord Cregan and his uncle Bernard talking off privately in a corner. Lord Cregan's uncle Bernard informs him that he is not ready for power and that the North is larger than any other kingdom combined, and the responsibility is for that of a man, not a boy. The scene ends with Cregan Stark leaving Winterfell to call his banners for a war against his uncle, who is refusing to release his grip on the North. Now, this person states that the rest of the episode actually takes place at Dragonstone. And in Rhaenyra's first scene, she is flying on the back of Syrax, the green she-dragon. She's flying with Laena, who is Daemon's wife, and her aunt is flying on Vhagar. Vhagar, now this is important, and this is not necessarily in the plot leak, I just want to add this, that Laena is a character in the Dance of Dragons and will likely be a main character, but the dragon that Laena Velaryon flies is actually the dragon Vhagar, rode by Queen Visenya during Aegon's conquest. Now, Vhagar is going to be one of those dragons that's probably close to the size of Daenerys' dragons at the end of Season 8. Well, I guess halfway through Season 8, I don't know. But getting back on track here, this person says that Rhaenyra is flying on Syrax with Laena, who is flying on Vhagar. They end up circling Dragonstone multiple times for several minutes during this scene, and during it, they're showing off their flight prowess, basically showing that they've been trained by professional dragon riders and have rode dragons nearly their entire life. We gotta remember, this is at the height of power during the Targaryens, so nearly every other person is a dragon rider. But after Laena and Rhaenyra fly till they nearly collapse from the sky of exhaustion, they land on the pebbly shore of Dragonstone just outside the gates and begin having a chat. It is then revealed that Queen Alicent and King Viserys' anniversary is coming up, and the Princess of Dragonstone, Rhaenyra, has been cordially invited. Rhaenyra shrugs off the news and wants to return to flying, but Laena warns her that skipping the royal tourney would be considered a slight to her father, the king, and Laena advises her to travel to King's Landing at once. Rhaenyra reluctantly agrees, and this person states that the end of the episode takes place with Rhaenyra departing Dragonstone on Syrax after being told by Laena to watch after her uncle, the prince, Damon, and that he will surely have gotten into some trouble in King's Landing. The last scene of the episode is of a hooded figure walking through a back alleyway which appears to be the streets of King's Landing, and this mysterious figure arrives at a red door. The door is swung open and a drunken, half-naked, shirtless Prince Damon greets the hooded figure and begins to remove their robe. It is revealed to be Rhaenyra, and the episode ends with the two of them making insanely lustful love. Now, I could sit here and rip that plot leak apart, but I'm not really going to. We are still pretty early on, and, as much as I know about the Dance of Dragons, clearly a lot of this stuff could potentially happen. This person actually wrote some cliff notes, so I do want to read those and share those with you guys. Now, they mentioned that the script could change to include a battle sequence with Daemon. Instead of Prince Daemon arriving at King's Landing on the back of his dragon, and that's sort of our first introduction to him, there could be another sequence with him sort of having his conquest of the Stepstones. They haven't really decided yet how far along in the timeline each character will be. This person also mentions that King Viserys was recast from the pilot episode, as well as 9 other cast members. Also, that some of the Winterfell plot hasn't been finalized. The show will in fact feature a young Cregan Stark, and he is said to look like Robb, but with dark features like Jon. It's said that he looks more like a Stark than Robb. This person also mentions that there is a scene in Essos that wasn't filmed for the pilot because they ran out of money, but instead was described in the script. I'm not sure what that scene was. It wasn't listed. They also mentioned that the tourney celebrating the 5th year anniversary of King Viserys I and Queen Alicent may actually be in the first episode. And then the last thing they mentioned is that there are more nude scenes in this show in the first episode than that of Game of Thrones. Overall, I thought that plot leak was interesting to say the least. As far as like the amount of action that will take place in the first episode, I'm pretty sure that, like that person had mentioned, there's going to be a battle sequence or maybe even some sort of tourney or something added to that first episode. What's interesting is that during this time, not only is it sort of becoming the perfect battleground for the Dance of Dragons to take place, but there is war in parts of the world. And the reason why I focus on battle and war so much is that Miguel Sapochnik, the guy who brought us the greatest battle scenes in television and cinematic history, is going to be a showrunner in this new series. So if he has his way, which he obviously will, and I'm pretty sure he's going to direct a great number of these episodes, there will be some heavy battle sequences. If I had to pick a favorite part of this plot leak, it was probably how the actual episode ended with Rhaenyra and Daemon making love. That would be something that the average show watcher wouldn't be expecting, and it is something to rumor had have happened in the books. According to the testimony of the Mushroom, Prince Daemon actually taught Rhaenyra how to pleasure a man. And y'all gotta realize, during this time, Daemon is supposed to be fucking everybody. So if this person is correct and the very first episode of House of the Dragon ends with a scene like that, well, then that'd be a huge callback to the very first episode of Game of Thrones with Cersei and Jaime having sex and subsequently pushing Bran out of the tower. Well, alright, I'm gonna wrap this video up. I wanna thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on it. The like goal is going to be 420. Also, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on so that way you'll get alerted every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. And once again, the winner for that contest is Kieran Ball. Please direct message me over on Twitter at sir_hunts with your info. I plan on doing another giveaway for one of my drawings again soon. I'm working on this portrait of Daenerys. Super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews, and I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name's Mark and this has been Sir Hunts Reviews.